Yemenia Flight 626, The Miracle in the Indian Ocean. A night approach to Moroni, a sudden stall, and one child alone on the sea. Just before 2 a.m. on June 30th, 2009, Yemenia Flight 626 began its night approach to Prince Said Ibrahim International Airport on Grande Comore in the Union of the Comoros. The aircraft, an Airbus A310, was operating the final leg of its journey from Sana'a, Yemen, to Moroni, with 153 people on board, 142 passengers, and 11 crew members. The arrival required a demanding circling approach over the open Indian Ocean. In darkness, with gusty winds and shifting air currents, the aircraft began its final maneuver. The approach never stabilized. Airspeed began to decay, the aircraft drifted above the proper path, and cockpit warnings sounded, including stall alerts and ground proximity warnings. Within seconds, the aircraft entered an aerodynamic stall and plunged into the sea north of Grande Comore, breaking apart on impact. 152 lives were lost. One survived, the night of the crash. No distress call was heard. Radar returns disappeared as the jet entered the final turn. With the sea below them pitch black, the crew had no visual reference point strong enough to recover the aircraft once it began to stall. Debris was spotted near the coastline of Mitsamiuli, and small boats from the Comoros were first on scene, joined later by French aircraft and rescue teams. In the middle of the scattered wreckage, clinging to floating debris, rescuers found a young girl, 9 hours on the water. Her name was Bakari, 12 years old, traveling with her mother from Paris to spend the summer with family in the Comoros. She had no life jacket. She could barely swim. But she survived the violent breakup and held onto debris in choppy, fuel-tainted water for around 9 hours, alone through the night. A passing ferry saw movement in the waves. A sailor dove in, swam to her, and pulled her aboard. She was injured, exhausted, and in shock, but alive. Bahia was flown to Paris and treated for fractures, burns, and cuts. In 2010, she published a memoir about her experience. As an adult, she has chosen a private life, appearing only occasionally at commemorations or in court hearings tied to the case. Search, recovery, and investigation deep-sea recovery teams mapped the seabed and deployed remotely operated vehicles. Both the flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder were retrieved from nearly 4,000 feet below the surface, a difficult and complex operation. The final investigation concluded that the airplane stalled during the circle-to-land approach at night, and that the flight crew did not respond effectively to multiple warnings. No mechanical defect was found that would have prevented recovery had the stall been corrected promptly. The long road toward accountability, grief turned quickly into a long fight for answers. Families in France and the Comoros pushed for responsibility to be acknowledged. After more than a decade of legal proceedings, a French court determined that Yemenia Airways bore criminal responsibility and issued fines and damages. These findings were upheld on appeal in 2024, your involvement final version. I had the privilege of working with many families of the victims who lived in Marseille and throughout the Comoros. It was a devastating tragedy, and I spent countless hours listening to their stories, hearing about their loved ones, the lives they lived, and the loss they now carried. I worked alongside a U.S. law firm and a law firm in Paris, France, helping families understand what was needed and coordinating nearly everything outside the courtroom so their attorneys could focus on the legal fight. The attorneys eventually reached settlements, and the legal battle continued for years in the French courts. By the time those final proceedings unfolded in 2022, I was no longer involved, but I never forgot the families or the strength they showed in those difficult months. Final reflection. Yemenia Flight 626 is remembered as a tragedy defined by a stalled approach, human factors breakdown, and a nighttime plunge into the sea, but also by a single, extraordinary survival. In total darkness, in the vastness of the Indian Ocean, a 12-year-old girl held on long enough for daylight and for help to find her. 152, gone. One survivor. Her name, Bakari, continues to stand as both a miracle and a reminder of the fragility of life and the resilience of the human spirit.